Okay, I think we're rolling. Okay, so let me just get my questions. So it's June 10th, and we're talking with Mary Ellen Wright from Newfoundland. And so, Mary Ellen, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about how you got into the archival profession.
Oh my. I was always interested in history. And then one summer, and I had signed up for a bunch of medieval history courses. And then one summer I went to work for the Colchester County Museum, which had an archival component. And we were hired to do research on various topics. And we went to the provincial archives in Halifax. And I was blown away by actually being able to touch the documents and see the lives and almost hear the words of the people who were complaining about living conditions in the 1820s and so on. And I had a conversion experience, and I shifted all my courses to Canadian and Maritime Provinces history, and I came back and got a part-time job at the old Provincial Archives of Nova Scotia, when it was right down in the old building on Dalhousie campus. And I loved it. I did a lot of reference work in the years that I worked at the Provincial Archives. I really enjoyed being the facilitator, not necessarily doing the research and so on, but being able to point people in directions, being able to work with collections so that people found them more accessible. Very satisfying work. So I left that work for a while and went over to the other side, the historian side. And then I left that too and went off and had children. And when I came back into the workforce, someone suggested to me, go back to the archival side. And I remembered how much I loved it. So I did a number of contract positions. I think I was in every church basement in St. John's doing archival descriptions, and I worked for various other places. And then I work for the Association of Newfoundland and Labrador Archives, and I get to go around to little community archives and hold their hands as they take their collections through from the green garbage bags to accessible and properly preserved and properly described and so on. And I get every day, or pretty often, to see people who are perhaps at the stage I was when I had my conversion experience.
So then how did you become involved in the ACA?
The first day, I was just thinking my first ACA was in Vancouver, but it wasn't. It was in 1980 when the Provincial Archives here in Nova Scotia opened up on Roby Street, where it is, and they hosted ACA. So that was the first one I went to. It was very enjoyable. We had it actually on site. We were having a lot of sessions in some of the vaults, which are now, I know, full of stuff. But then when I took this position, I'm the professional development outreach officer, but I'm the only staff person, and so I'm continuity, and the person in my position would be continuity for the organization. So they have a policy of, if they've got any money, send the PDO, as we say, the Archives Advisor, to ACA. So that was how I started to come to ACA on a regular basis. My first one was in Vancouver. That was a long way to go, and I'll never forget, myself and Greg Walsh and Larry Dowie were coming into the airport. We just flown across the country, a non-stop flight, 9 hours, and we'd left at about 5 in the morning, and it was still morning in Vancouver. And the first human being we met in the airport corridors was a musician from St. John's. And we thought, oh God, did we change planes somehow? Did we make a wrong turn in Winnipeg? But it was I really enjoyed the sessions. You don't get, in my position, you don't get a lot of opportunities for professional development and interaction. The professional archival community is fairly small, quite small in Newfoundland. And so I spend most of my time either teaching or arranging or facilitating introductory courses to all kinds of things. So to come here and to listen to people who have the time or the interest or the energy to explore a little more deeply, or to get to have actual theoretical discussions with people, that's really, really enjoyable. I've missed the last 3, but I'm back now.
What year was Vancouver?
It must have been 2002.
Okay.
because I started in December, and this position I started in December 2000, and I didn't go to the first year. So I think Vancouver was 2002.
Right, okay. Let me just get a different angle.
See what my best angle is.
We're just a little concerned about the noise factor.
Yeah.
Okay, so then how would you say technology has really changed archivists' careers and lives? And
Oh wow. Well, we're our own typists for one thing now. We do all of our. We don't have any support staff anymore, or most of us. We're it. It makes it a lot easier to make things accessible, but by the same token, there's a lot more demand. There's just assumption by the general public that everything is digitized, and so you should just be able to get it. And on the part of, say, administrators, I know I've dealt with a municipality, their council just wanted to digitize all their back records. No appraisal, no attempted organization, no intellectual, just digitize it all. And I said, no, because you still won't be able to find anything, so there's those issues. There are all kinds of issues in terms of controlling access. People get records, they'll transcribe them, or maybe they'll even scan them without thinking of the ramifications. And then, or on the other hand, they'll want to use things for certain things and be very nervous of it, because the availability of the internet has heightened concerns about copyright, about privacy and confidentiality. So people are a little more sophisticated in that way. Now, the people I'm dealing with are people who are, for most of our membership, they're at the very basic level, and in many cases they don't have large collections. Photographs, or just even donations. People are much more likely to donate scanned copies of things. And people don't, although they're delighted, say, to get the pictures, they don't take them seriously as documents. And I have to say to them, you've just acquired this information. You have to collect the same stuff about it as you would about the photograph if it came in and stuff. You've got to ask the same questions about copyright. You've got to collect the same donor information and so on. And people, they don't really get that. And the other thing is that digitization is a really good tool, but but we have found on and off over the years that the push to digitize sometimes drives all other agendas aside, and so it's a good servant but a bad master. So I guess those would be some of the things that would have made a big difference. I don't have to deal very much with electronic records at this point, but it's coming down the pike. I'm trying to get people to get ready for it and to think about it, and to think about, people want to deal, they say, well, they want to do records management. Well, what they really want to do is clean out their closets. And when you get to the stage of, okay, you've dealt with all the stuff before you got the computers, now you're still dealing with information. It's just now it's electronic, and you have a hard time. People just don't think. They don't realize that that's the case. And by the same token, I guess it makes you even more aware that the business of archivists is to preserve information. It's not to preserve ledgers. It's not to preserve things. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's the most effective way of preserving the information. Sometimes the thing itself is iconic enough that it requires to be preserved. But in many cases, it's the information that needs to be preserved. And if the items are, or the boxes are, the ledgers are moldy and rotten and it would cost too much to preserve the things, that you always have to choose the information. That's a choice that's a lot more readily available now, but it's because it's more readily available, because that option exists, it's also more controversial, and some institutions end up being hung out to dry a little because of that. So those are just some ways, but really, it's revolutionized the way that we think about information.
so it's affected the profession.
I think so, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right from as I say, the people that I deal with who are often the beginners, right through to, the large institutions.
Who would you say are some of the key players in the archival field that may have, influenced you or?
Well, I have to say, Mr. Taylor. Hugh Taylor was the archivist at the Nova Scotia Archives when I started there. He had just come on around about the same time as I did, and he supervised the move. And he was a fine man, and he was not afraid to think creatively about archives. And I would say that he was a very influential person for me in the archival community. He's the person who jumps to mind. If I were to sit down now and think about the articles that I've read and the other archival thinking that I've encountered, I would probably come across other people, but I still go back to the ways that he thought about things.
Now, how has the ACA then? You've talked a little bit about how it's been useful to you, and how have you felt that your interaction has been with the ACA over the years?
ACA is an organization. On an individual, personal basis, as an archivist, trying to keep in touch with the community of archivists, it's been a very positive thing. It's been a lifeline. As an archives advisor, dealing with a large number of small community archives and working closely with the provincial association, sometimes, well, they've never been bad, but they've so often been oblivious. I've noticed in the last couple of years that that's starting to change, and that the I guess the movers and shakers at ACA have started to be aware that while that if you're going to have professional standards, don't just belong to professional salaries, and that there are a wide range of resources available, a wide range of levels of archiving, shall we say, and they've started to recognize that somewhat. You don't need to, I mean, it's my business to teach basic archives. It's not the business of ACA to be doing that, but they've started to be aware of the fact that this is going on. I remember, when was it? Maybe 2003 or 2004. They had an ACA education. Remember, I think you might even have been there. They brought everybody to Ottawa one winter, and they decided to talk about ACA what the role of ACA would be in education, and I think they got a bit of a shock because the people who came in from outside of the central core and the archival schools were saying, no, you're not addressing our needs. You don't even understand what our needs are. You don't know anything about what regional dynamics are. There's a whole bunch of stuff you don't know. And I didn't think so for a long time, but I think that they've learned from that to realize that there are areas that they can cooperate in. There are areas where perhaps the best thing would be to leave it alone. I think that's positive. Yeah, I think that it's a changing organization, and right now, I think it's an organization that is starting to hear the issues that the people I deal with represent.
Okay, and finally, is there anything else about the ACA that you'd like to say?
I've never seen such mad dancers. I have never ever seen anything like it. I'll never forget going to that first thing in Vancouver, and the dinner wasn't even on the table just about, and people were dancing. They danced as if their funding depended on how much they danced.
That's great. Thank you. Oh, that's perfect.